Saksakalyan gunarnavasya Vande Guru Sri Charanaravindan.
It was a wonderful structure, bedecked with all sorts of jewels, adorned with pillars of precious stones, and capable of yielding whatever one desired. It was equipped with every form of furniture and wealth, which tended to increase in the course of time. The castle created in the sky by Kardama Muni may be called a castle in the air, but by his mystic power of yoga, Kardama Muni actually constructed a huge castle in the air. To our feeble imagination, a castle in the sky is an impossibility, but if we scrutinizingly consider the matter, we can understand that it is not impossible at all. If the Supreme Personality of Godhead can create so many planets, carrying millions of castles in the air, a perfect yogi like Kardama Muni can easily construct one castle in the air. The castle is described as Sarva Kama Dugam, yielding whatever one desired. It was full of jewels. Even the pillars were made of pearls and valuable stones. These valuable jewels and stones were not subject to deterioration, but were everlastingly and increasingly opulent. We sometimes hear of castles thus bedecked on the surface of this earth also. The castles constructed by Lord Krishna for his lamplight during the night. The castle was fully equipped with all necessary paraphernalia, and it was pleasing in all seasons. It was decorated all around with flags, festoons, and artistic work of variegated colours. It was further embellished with wreaths of charming flowers that attracted sweetly humming bees, and with tapestries of linen, silk, and various other fabrics. The palace looked charming, with beds, couches, fans, and seats, all separately arranged in 7 stories. It is understood from this verse that the castle had many stories. The words upari vinyasta indicate that skyscrapers are not newly invented. Even in those days, millions of years ago, the idea of building many-storied houses was current. They contained not merely 1 or 2 rooms, but many different apartments, and each was completely decorated with cushions, bedsteads, sitting places, and carpets. Its beauty was enhanced by artistic engravings here and there on the walls. The floor was of emerald with coral daisies. At the present moment, people are very proud of their architectural art, yet floors are generally decorated with coloured cement. It appears, however, that the castle constructed by the yogic powers of Kardama Muni had floors of emerald with coral daisies. This was very beautiful, with its coral thresholds at the entrances and its doors bedecked with diamonds. Gold pinnacles crowned its domes of sapphire. With the choicest rubies set in its diamond walls, it appeared as though possessed of eyes. It was furnished with wonderful canopies and greatly valuable gates of gold. Artistic jewellery and decorations giving the appearance of eyes are not imaginary. Even in recent times, the Mughal emperors constructed their palaces with decorations of jewelled birds with eyes made of valuable stones. The stones have been taken away by the authorities, but the decorations are still present in some of the castles constructed by the Mughal emperors in New Delhi. The royal palaces were built with jewels and rare stones resembling eyes, and thus at night they would give off reflective light without need of lamps. Here and there in that palace were multitudes of live swans and pigeons, as well as artificial swans and pigeons so lifelike that the real swans rose above them again and again, thinking them live birds like themselves. Thus the palace vibrated with the sounds of these birds. The castle had pleasure grounds, resting chambers, bedrooms, and inner and outer yards designed with an eye to comfort. All this caused astonishment to the sage himself. Kardama Muni, being a saintly person, was living in a humble hermitage, but when he saw the palace constructed by his yogic powers, which was full of resting rooms, rooms for sex enjoyment, and inner and outer yards, he himself was astonished. That is the way of a God-gifted person. A devotee like Kardama Muni exhibited such opulence by his yogic power at the request of his wife, but when the opulence was produced, he himself could not understand how such manifestations could be possible. When a yogi's power is exhibited, the yogi himself is sometimes astonished. When he saw Devahūti looking at the gigantic opulent palace with a displeased heart, Kardama Muni could understand her feelings because he could study the heart of anyone. Thus, he personally addressed his wife as follows. Devahūti had spent a long time in the hermitage, not taking much care of her body. She was covered with dirt, and her clothing was not very nice. Kardama Muni was surprised that he could produce such a palace, and similarly his wife, Devahūti, was also astonished. How could she live in that opulent palace? Kardama Muni could understand her astonishment, and thus he spoke as follows. My dear Devahūti, you look very much afraid. First bathe in Lake Bindu Sarovar, created by Lord Vishnu himself, which can grant all the desires of a human being, and then mount this airplane. It is still the system to go to places of pilgrimage and take a bath in the water there. In Vrindavan, the people take baths in the river Yamuna. In other places, such as Prayaga, they take baths in the river Gangas. The words Tirtham Ashisham Yapakam refer to the fulfillment of desires by bathing in a place of pilgrimage. Kardama Muni advised his good wife to bathe in Lake Bindusaravara so that she could revive the former beauty and luster of her body. The lotus-eyed Devahūti accepted the order of her husband. Because of her dirty dress and the locks of matted hair on her head, she did not look very attractive. It appears that Devahūti's hair had remained uncombed for many years and had become complicated in tangles. In other words, she neglected her bodily dress and comforts to engage in the service of her husband. Her body was coated with a thick layer of dirt, and her breasts were discoloured. She dove, however, into the lake, which contained the sacred waters of the Sarasvati. In a house inside the lake, she saw 1,000 girls, all in the prime of youth and fragrant like lotuses. Seeing her, the damsels suddenly rose and said with folded hands, "We are your maidservants. Tell us what we can do for you." While Devahūti was thinking of what to do in that great palace in her dirty clothes, there were at once, by the yogic powers of Kardama Muni, 1,000 maidservants prepared to serve her. They appeared before Devahūti within the water and presented themselves as her maidservants, simply awaiting her orders. The girls, being very respectful to Devahūti, brought her forth, and after bathing her with valuable oils and ointments, they gave her fine, new, spotless cloth to cover her body. They then decorated her with very excellent and valuable jewels which shone brightly. Next they offered her food containing all good qualities and a sweet, inebriating drink called asavam. Asavam is an Ayurvedic medical preparation. It is not a liquor. It is especially made from drugs and is meant to improve metabolism for the healthy condition of the body. Then in a mirror she beheld her own reflection. Her body was completely freed from all dirt, and she was adorned with a garland. Dressed in unsullied robes and decorated with auspicious marks of tilaka, she was served very respectfully by the maids. Her entire body, including her head, was completely bathed, and she was decorated all over with ornaments. She wore a special necklace with a locket. There were bangles on her wrists and tinkling anklets of gold about her ankles. The word Kritashnanam appears here. According to the Smriti Shastra's directions for daily duties, ladies are allowed to bathe daily up to the neck. The hair on the head does not necessarily have to be washed daily because the mass of wet hair may cause a cold. For ladies, therefore, taking a bath up to the neck is ordinarily prescribed, and they take a full bath only on certain occasions. On this occasion, Devahūti took a full bath and washed her hair very nicely. When a lady takes an ordinary bath, it is called mala snana, and when she takes a full bath, including the head, it is called shirasnana. At this time, she needs sufficient oil to smear on her head. That is the direction of the commentators of Smriti Shastra. About her hips she wore a girdle of gold, set with numerous jewels, and she was further adorned with a precious pearl necklace and auspicious substances. Auspicious substances include saffron, kunkuma, and sandalwood pulp. Before taking a bath, there are other auspicious substances, such as turmeric mixed with mustard seed oil, which are smeared all over the body. All kinds of auspicious substances were used to bathe Devahūti from top to toe. Her countenance shone, with beautiful teeth and charming eyebrows. Her eyes, distinguished by lovely moist corners, defeated the beauty of lotus buds. Her face was surrounded by dark curling tresses. According to Vedic culture, white teeth are very much appreciated. Devahūti's white teeth increased the beauty of her face and made it look like a lotus flower. When a face looks very attractive, The eyes are generally compared to lotus petals and the face to a lotus flower. When she thought of her great husband, the best of the sages, Kardama Muni, who was very dear to her, she, along with all the maidservants, at once appeared where he was. It appears from this verse that, in the beginning, Devahūti thought herself to be dirty and dressed in a very niggardly way. When her husband asked her to enter the lake, she saw the maidservants, and they took care of her. Everything was done within the water, and as soon as she thought of her beloved husband, Kardama, she was brought before him without delay. These are some of the powers attained by perfect yogis. They can immediately execute anything they desire. She was amazed to find herself surrounded by 1,000 maids in the presence of her husband and to witness his yogic power. Devahūti saw everything miraculously done. Yet when brought before her husband, she could understand that it was all due to his great yogic mystic power. She understood that nothing was impossible for a yogi like Kardama Muni. The sage could see that Devahūti had washed herself clean and was shining forth as though no longer his former wife. She had regained her own original beauty as the daughter of a prince. Dressed in excellent robes, her charming breasts duly girded, she was waited upon by 1,000 Gandharva girls. O destroyer of the enemy, his fondness for her grew, and he placed her on the aerial mansion. Before her marriage, when Devahūti was brought by her parents before the sage Kardama, she was the perfectly beautiful princess, and Kardama Muni remembered her former beauty. But after her marriage, when she was engaged in the service of Kardama Muni, she neglected to care for her body like a princess, since there was no means for such care. Her husband was living in a cottage, and since she was always engaged in serving him, her royal beauty disappeared, and she became just like an ordinary maidservant. Now, after being bathed by the Gandharva girls by the order of Kardama Muni's yogic power, she regained her beauty, and Kardama Muni felt attracted to the beauty she had shown before the marriage. The real beauty of a young woman is her breasts. When Kardama Muni saw the breasts of his wife so nicely decorated, increasing her beauty many times, he was attracted, even though he was a great sage. Sripada Shankaracharya has therefore warned the transcendentalists that one who is after transcendental realization should not be attracted by the raised breasts of a woman, because they are nothing but an interaction of fat and blood within the body. Though seemingly attached to his beloved consort while served by the Gandharva girls, the sage did not lose his glory, which was mastery over his self. In the aerial mansion, Kardama Muni with his consort shone as charmingly as the moon in the midst of the stars in the sky, which causes rows of lilies to open in ponds at night. The mansion was in the sky, and therefore the comparison to the full moon and stars is very beautifully composed in this verse. Kardama Muni looked like the full moon, and the girls who surrounded his wife Devahūti seemed like the stars. On a full moon night, the stars and the moon together form a beautiful constellation. Similarly, in that aerial mansion in the sky, Kardama Muni with his beautiful wife and the damsels surrounding them appeared like the moon and stars on a full moon night. In that aerial mansion he travelled to the pleasure valleys of Mount Meru, which were rendered all the more beautiful by cool, gentle, fragrant breezes that stimulated passion. In these valleys, the treasurer of the gods, Kuvera, surrounded by beautiful women and praised by the siddhas, generally enjoys pleasure. Kardama Muni also, surrounded by the beautiful damsels and his wife, went there and enjoyed for many, many years. Kuvera is one of the 8 demigods who are in charge of different directions of the universe. It is said that Indra is in charge of the eastern side of the universe, where the heavenly planet, or paradise, is situated. Similarly, Agni is in charge of the southeastern portion of the universe. Yama, the demigod who punishes sinners, is in charge of the southern portion. Niriti is in charge of the southwestern part of the universe. Varuna, the demigod in charge of the waters, is in charge of the western portion. Vayu, who controls the air and who has wings to travel in the air, is in charge of the northwestern part of the universe. And Kuvera, the treasurer of the demigods, is in charge of the northern part of the universe. All these demigods take pleasure in the valleys of Mount Meru, which is situated somewhere between the sun and the earth. In the aerial mansion, Kardama Muni travelled throughout the 8 directions, controlled by the different demigods described above, and as the demigods go to Mount Meru, he also went there to enjoy life. When one is surrounded by young, beautiful girls, sex stimulation naturally becomes prominent. Kardama Muni was sexually stimulated, and he enjoyed his wife for many, many years in that part of Mount Meru. But his sex indulgence was praised by many, many siddhas, beings who have attained perfection, because it was intended to produce good progeny for the good of universal affairs. Satisfied by his wife, he enjoyed in that aerial mansion not only on Mount Meru but in different gardens known as Vaishrambaka, Sarasana, Nandana, Pushpa-Bhadraka and Kaitrarathya, and by the Manasa Saravara lake. He travelled in that way through the various planets as the air passes uncontrolled in every direction. Coursing through the air in that great and splendid aerial mansion, which could fly at his will, he surpassed even the demigods. The planets occupied by the demigods are restricted to their own orbits, but Kardama Muni, by his yogic power, could travel all over the different directions of the universe without restriction. The living entities who are within the universe are called conditioned souls. That is, they are not free to move everywhere. We are inhabitants of this earthly globe. We cannot move freely to other planets. In the modern age, man is trying to go to other planets, but so far he has been unsuccessful. It is not possible to travel to any other planets because by the laws of nature, even the demigods can move from one planet to another. But Kardama Muni, by his yogic power, could surpass the strength of the demigods and travel in space in all directions. The comparison here is very suitable. The words Yatha Anila indicate that as the air is free to move anywhere without restriction, so Kardama Muni unrestrictedly travelled in all directions of the universe. What is difficult to achieve for determined men who have taken refuge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's lotus feet? His feet are the source of sacred rivers like the Gangas, which put an end to the dangers of mundane life. The words Yair Ashritas Tirtha Padashkarana are significant here. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as Tirtha Pada. The Gangas is called a sacred river because it emanates from the toe of Vishnu. The Gangas is meant to eradicate all the material distresses of the conditioned souls. For any living entity, therefore, who has taken shelter of the holy lotus feet of the Lord, nothing is impossible. Kardama Muni is special not because he was a great mystic, but because he was a great devotee. Therefore it is said here that for a great devotee like Kardama Muni, nothing is impossible. Although yogis can perform wonderful feats, as Kardama has already displayed, Kardama was more than a yogi because he was a great devotee of the Lord. Therefore he was more glorious than an ordinary yogi. As it is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, out of the many yogis, he who is a devotee of the Lord is first class. For a person like Kardama Muni, there is no question of being conditioned. He was already a liberated soul, and better than the demigods, who are also conditioned. Although he was enjoying with his wife and many other women, he was above material, conditional life. Therefore the word Vyasanatya is used to indicate that he was beyond the position of a conditioned soul. He was transcendental to all material limitations. After showing his wife the globe of the universe and its different arrangements, full of many wonders, the great yogi Kardama Muni returned to his own hermitage. All the planets are here described as Gola, round. Every planet is round, and each planet is a different shelter, just like islands in the great ocean. Planets are sometimes called Dvipa or Varsha. This earth planet is called Bharat Varsha because it was ruled by King Bharat. Another significant word used in this verse is Bhav Ashcharyam, many wonderful things. This indicates that the different planets are distributed all over the universe in the 8 directions, and each and every one of them is wonderful in itself. Each planet has its particular climatic influences and particular types of inhabitants and is completely equipped with everything, including the beauty of the seasons. In the Brahm Samhita it is similarly stated, Vibhuti Binnam, on each and every planet there are different opulences. It cannot be expected that one planet is exactly like another. By God's grace, by nature's law, each and every planet is made differently and has different wonderful features. All such wonders were personally experienced by Kardama Muni while he travelled with his wife, yet he could return again to his humble hermitage. He showed his princess wife that although he was living in the hermitage, he had the power to go everywhere and do anything by mystic yoga. That is the perfection of yoga. One cannot become a perfect yogi simply by showing some sitting postures, nor by such sitting postures or so-called meditation can one become God, as is being advertised. Foolish persons are misled into believing that simply by some caricature of meditation and sitting postures one can become God within 6 months. Here is the example of a perfect yogi. He could travel all over the universe. Similarly, there is a description of Devahūti Muni, who also travelled in space. Actually, the perfect yogi can do that. But even if one can travel all over the universe and show wonderful feats like Kardama Muni, he cannot be compared to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose power and inconceivable energy can never be attained by any conditioned or liberated soul. By the actions of Kardama Muni, we can understand that in spite of his immense mystic power, he remained a devotee of the Lord. That is the real position of every living entity. After coming back to his hermitage, he divided himself into 9 personalities just to give pleasure to Devahūti, the daughter of Manu, who was eager for sex life. In that way he enjoyed with her for many, many years, which passed just like a moment. Here the daughter of Swayambhuv Manu, Devahūti, is described as Suratotsaka. After travelling with her husband all over the universe, in Mount Meru and the beautiful gardens of the heavenly kingdoms, she naturally became sexually stimulated, and in order to satisfy her sexual desire, Kardama Muni expanded himself into 9 forms. Instead of 1, he became 9, and 9 persons had sexual intercourse with Devahūti for many, many years. It is understood that the sexual appetite of a woman is 9 times greater than that of a man. That is clearly indicated here. Otherwise, Kardama Muni would have had no reason to expand himself into 9. Here is another example of yogic power. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead can expand himself in millions of forms, a yogi can also expand up to 9 forms, but not more than that. Another example is that of Saubhari Muni. He also expanded himself into 8 forms. But however powerful a yogi may be, he cannot expand himself into more than 8 or 9 forms. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, however, can expand himself into millions of forms, Anantarupa, innumerable, countless forms, as stated in the Brahma Samhita. No one can compare to the Supreme Personality of Godhead by any conceivable energetic manifestation of power. In that aerial mansion, Devahūti, in the company of her handsome husband, situated on an excellent bed that increased sexual desires, could not realize how much time was passing. Sex indulgence is so enjoyable for materialistic people that when they engage in such activities, they forget how time is passing. Saint Kardama and Devahūti, in their sex indulgence, also forgot how time was passing by. While the couple, who eagerly longed for sexual pleasure, were thus enjoying themselves by virtue of mystic powers, 100 autumns passed like a brief span of time. The powerful Kardama Muni was the knower of everyone's heart, and he could grant whatever one desired. Knowing the spiritual soul, he regarded her as half of his body. Dividing himself into 9 forms, he impregnated Devahūti with 9 discharges of semen. Since Kardama Muni could understand that Devahūti wanted many children, at the first chance he begot 9 children at one time. He is described here as Vibhu, the most powerful master. By his yogic power, he could at once produce 9 daughters in the womb of Devahūti.